My name is Karis Ingram, and I'm a project manager in the education department here at Build a Green. I will be facilitating today's webinar. Today's topic is part 1 of a 3-part series on the Cornerstone concepts for quality property management. We will be saving all questions for the end of the webinar, but we encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation. Build a Green is presenting this webinar on behalf of the Energy Network, which is a local government organization created by the California Public Utilities Commission that provides resources and assistance to homeowners, businesses, and public agencies planning energy efficiency upgrades serving the Southern California region. These services include community education and outreach, such as these webinars, rebate and incentive offerings, attractive financing terms, and tools to help identify contractors that have been trained in energy efficiency. Additional resources help homeowners take the next steps towards saving energy. The Energy Network also has a great program for multifamily property owners, and we'll tell you a little bit more about that towards the end of the webinar. Today's presenter is John Wilhoit of Multifamily Insight. John Wilhoit is president of Wilhoit Investment Network, an owner and asset manager of apartments, condos, and townhomes. His career has focused on high-volume, large-scale multifamily communities, including market rate and mixed finance developments. He has previously held positions with the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, Apartment Investment Management Company, and the Maryland Housing Fund. He's also the co-founder of Power Hour Leadership Academy, a live weekly program that assists property management teams with increasing their property management fees and expanding new business development opportunities while controlling expenses. This live weekly academy focuses on maximizing net operating income and increasing the net asset value of property management companies through its leading edge GRACE, grow revenue and control expenses strategy. Multifamily Insight is John's blog that he provides his perspective on the world of multifamily acquisitions, management, and investing. Please join me in welcoming John Wilhoit, Jr.
Good afternoon, Karis.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for having me. My name is John Wilhoit. As Karis had shared, I am a California native, born and raised in Los Angeles. I reside in the Midwest now, but LA is still home. I'm there often, and I do have a kid going to school in Southern California. All the more reason why I'm there often. I'm also a Pepperdine graduate, so I have the same tattoo as many other natives there. You know, there's not a lot of us, but there is a lot of us that were born and raised in California. So I'm pleased to be here with you today. We've got a presentation related to property management and concepts related to operating your property at its highest and best use. So I'm waiting on you, Karis, just to get to the first slide, I guess. Yes?
We're on the first slide.
We are? Okay. All right. So the first slide relates to property management never being any less complex than it is today. And what I mean by that is it is an ever-changing industry. It also is changing faster than most people would imagine. And although it is kind of an old line industry, people think of it as being kind of slow. If you're in the business full-time, you realize that it is a continuously moving business that doesn't slow down at all. And let me just provide you with a few examples. One of them being, you know, imagine that you lost your cell phone and it can't be replaced for a week. Or in the interim, instead of getting a track phone or something that will take its place, you look around the house and the office for an older phone and you come across a BlackBerry that's 2 years old. So imagine the effort it would take to even see if that old piece of technology would work on today's networks. You know, the likelihood is that it's not the likelihood is you're better off buying that $25 track phone until your phone is ready or replaced, because that older piece of technology really will not come up to speed. So we do the same thing with respect to cars. You know, if you have an older car that cannot connect to the dealerships of today with the automation that they have, then that old car is going to take longer to get fixed versus shorter because it's not connected to any digital control of some sort. So in property management, the same thing is occurring. You know, we have new tools today that were not here 2 years ago, certainly that were not here 5 years ago. You know, such a thing as an ILS, Internet Listing Service, didn't exist 10 years ago. And if it did, it was, you know, clunky and not very functional and didn't offer very much. And if you're using Craigslist today, if you're in a 24-hour city, there's no such thing as posting once a week or even posting once a day, right, if you want to stay on page one. You very likely have to be posting consistently throughout the day to even have a chance of remaining on page one. So that's a change from even a few years ago, where posting an ad in the newspaper and putting it on your website if you're a property management company pretty much meant that you were done with marketing, with advertising. Now, the primary resident that you're looking for and that's looking for you, probably 70% of them are looking for apartments on their mobile device. They're not at their office looking, they're in their car, or they're next to the train, or they're going to the next place that they find on their mobile device. And when the phone rings, if nobody's picking up the phone, that's really not a problem for them, because they're just going on to the next telephone number that they can call to see what's available that day, because they need a place next week. Many, many people look 1, 2, and 3 weeks before it's time to move, not 1, 2, and 3 months. So that's also a change, right? That is a transitional way that people gravitate or transition or move to the next place. If they're not renewing at their existing locale, they're not waiting until the next month or two to look. They're waiting for the next week or two. So they're looking for a place at the same time that they're purchasing boxes, at the same time that they're identifying apartments for their next place to reside. So that is part of the complexity. The complexity is the transition speed of which your residents are moving in and out, the transition speed of doing turnovers, the transition speed of what's necessary to keep your staff in the know of how to address residents that are coming to your place today. Here's another example. How many of you have found the perfect floor covering for your place, only to find out that it's no longer being produced? And if you bought 200 yards of X carpet last year, unless you bought another 200 yards, when you go back for another 50 yards, it's no longer in stock. It's not a match. The name has changed. The SKU number has changed. Even though it's the perfect continuity, color, texture, and quality for what you need, unless you find a place to store additional product, then you likely can't find that product yet again. So going to National Association of Home Builder conferences or multifamily conferences where every year there are thousands of new products, that's all well and good. But even when you find one that works well for you, the idea of being able to stick with it and utilize it forevermore, the probability is very low. So that's another part of the complexity of our business. And even if you're using Delta products for plumbing or Mullen products for plumbing, yes, the fixtures will fit, but they won't necessarily match year after year. So it's just difficult, if not impossible, to remain or to remain consistent in your product type, even with fixtures, unless you're willing to store those fixtures, which is a whole other problem, right? Because then you would need storage space. You have to make sure that they don't disappear or walk off, and someone has to maintain that storage space in addition to paying for it and having it there. So what I'm really saying is that with respect to the complexity of our business, timeliness, in essence, has compressed. So decisions that you had to make over a 6 or 12-month term, now you have to make over an even shorter term. And even though we still have 4 seasons, yes, planning for those 4 seasons has also a shorter time frame. And let me give you an example. For those of you that shop in the big box stores, whether it's Home Depot, Lowe's, Sam's Club, Costco, etc., if you're looking for spring gear, that spring gear is probably just about gone now, if it's not already gone, with summer gear taking its place, right? So spring has just sprung. Spring is here now, but the product, if you're buying product in bulk from those stores, they've already moved on to the next season. So it's in essence a 6-week season for them, and that 6 weeks starts before the beginning of the season. So if you need grass seed, yes, you can find grass seed. But if you're looking to buy it in bulk at the best price, and you need it for the beginning of the season, you likely need to buy it 6 weeks before the season begins. So that's a change, whereas, yes, there's grass seed available all year in certain departments at certain locations. When the bulk of that product comes in, it's long before the season starts, and it's likely gone before the season starts. Now, just think of the fashion industry right now, or I should say in the first quarter of this year, is when there was the release of fall fashions, right? So that's 9 months before fall. Those fashions come out, and stores have an opportunity to review them, purchase them for the fall season. So they're looking at fall in January, and they're looking at summer and winter, so the timelines, again, they're lengthened, but yet they are compressed. And that's what's occurring within property management. That's why I say the business will never be less complex than it is today because of those types of factors that are occurring in this business regularly. So using internet listing services as an example, again, yes, you can get page 1 listings, but for a higher price. And with respect to the tools that we use for website aggregation and marketing, yes, those tools are available, but not at the price point that they were 5 years ago because they become more sophisticated and they're able to price their products, marketing aggregation products, at a price that reflects the activity or the level of, not necessarily need, what am I looking for, level of competition today. And you are a consumer of those services, then you're competing with other companies, with other multifamily properties for that spot on that page. So the more competition as there is, the higher the price point that the service provider is allowed to, or thinks that they can obtain. So that, again, is a change from even 2 years ago, where if they could even get multifamily property owners to list on an ILS, that was a big deal. But anymore, it's a competitive marketplace. Do you have questions, Karis, that you want to bring in, or should we go on to the next slide? Then to the initial topic of the matter that property management will never be any less complex. You've all heard the statement that there's no such thing as a second impression, or you never get a second chance to make a first impression. When you think about websites, people spend on average 30 seconds or less on a website, not on a web page, but on a website. And they may have clicked through 2, 3, 4, 5 pages within that 30 seconds, and then they're gone. When people come to your property, it's the same kind of thing. They may not even come in. They may just drive up to the property or drive by the property, and you have between 5 and 10 seconds to make an impression. And whether you realize it or not, that is the true impact of property presentation. That's why I say property presentation is imperative. You really have a very short porch, a very short window to make a quality, good first impression And that's why, as an example, landscaping is so very important. You know, landscaping really is an asset. It's something that draws people's attention, particularly when you can add color, particularly when you can add quality. And I'm not referring to overt landscaping or, you know, significant cost, but having sustainable landscaping allows you to capture the attention of that potential resident. And then once they are a resident, allows you to capture them for an extension or a renewal because they're comfortable in the space that they're in, not only inside their apartment home, but outside their apartment home. So let's talk a little bit about property presentation beyond landscape. Property presentation is the owner's initial visual contact with current and potential customers. Remember I mentioned that 5 to 10 seconds? That's what you have to capture a potential resident's attention. So here's some things that I'd like you to consider. When looking at your own property, whether you own it or are managing it, try to see what your customers see. Look at the property through their eyes. And then ask yourself, honestly, if what you see is a positive or a negative. And then the next question is, for those negatives that you see, how quickly can the negatives be removed? You know, sometimes it's something as simplistic as trash, of course, right, or cleanliness, or things that should be in order. But sometimes it's a little bit more detailed. Perhaps it's fencing that's rusted. Doesn't necessarily mean the fencing has to be replaced, but it may need to be sandblasted and painted through. Or it could be gates or locks that are in the same category, exterior. But they've seen better days. They don't necessarily need to be replaced, but they do need some TLC. What about cracks in the concrete? It's a very simplistic thing to fix, but it still needs to be fixed, not only for safety, but also for property presentation. Now, everyone's seen, at least on television, beautiful, wonderful horse farms that are in Lexington, Kentucky, and in the Smoky Mountains, and in the rural areas of Virginia. The larger horse farms, they'll have a staff of people that do nothing but keep everything pristine, right? That's all they do. Well, as an operating manager or owner of a property, you have a lot of things to do, and one of them, unfortunately but true, is to make sure that the property is kept up. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be the one doing it, but if you're not, it still falls under your umbrella to assure that the property is in good order, that when that property presentation comes up, which is daily, if it's a property of size, because there's always people coming and going, that the property presentation does not detract from that new potential resident. That's the real issue with property presentation. That's why I call it imperative. You really don't have a second chance to make that first impression, and you don't know when those potential residents are coming by. Sometimes they are friends of current residents, right? So they're on property, they're there for a social visit, and because of that, because of what they see, because of their comfort level, because one of their friends already lives there, it may be a natural next step for them to come to the leasing office and inquire about available proposals. Well, they're not going to do that if they're not comfortable on property, if the property is unkept, if it doesn't look to have that certain lived-in feel to it, but at the same time be a place that has some color, back to the landscaping, cleanliness, and quality staff, meaning those that are just attentive. That is part of property management presentation. Having a staff that's well-trained, that knows how to act and interact with clients, that's what I call residents often, clients, and potential clients, which are our future residents, right? So that is all part of the property presentation also. So fold that in to not only how the property looks, but how your staff interacts with the clients that you service. You ready to go on to the next one? Kara? Okay, our third and final item utility expenses. This is another core concept in quality property management. There are numerous utilities, more than before, right? It is changing even still. Yes, everyone needs food, shelter, and water. Everyone needs heat, water, a place to cook in some form or fashion. But the level and type of utilities is still changing. Part of what Energy Network does is address utilities, right? It tries to make what you have in existing in your properties something that is more efficient, less cost, using less energy. So with respect to controlling utility expenses, the first thing you need to determine is how many do you have? And that's a question that may seem obvious, but once you start to list them, you may identify one or two that you were unaware of prior. Because remember, all of these utility expenditures are definitely directly affecting your net operating income. So when you make your list, you can't miss any. So the obvious ones are electric, gas, cable, water, sewer. Other utilities include, can you name a few, Karis, that I haven't?
I think you listed most that we would list as well.
Right. So there's also trash, right, or rubbish expense. There may be one or two more that are all in some form or fashion connected to your property. So we can't say cable, but once you say cable, then you also have to deal with sometimes the satellite dish networks, right, which is still a cable provider, but yet it's a separate type of utility than just straight cable, which may come in through a wire versus through a wireless signal. So all of these are impacting your asset in some form or fashion. So the question is, which of these are you paying for? Which of these can you control? Because you cannot control all of the expenditures related to your property. So, and I'll give you an example. There's a property that we have where we went through and installed water-saving devices throughout the entire development. And installing those water-saving devices reduced the water bill by 15%, which was a significant savings. However, the very next year, the water utility increased rates by 15%. So as much as we enjoyed those savings, it was not a long-lasting saving because we couldn't go back yet the next year and install additional devices that reduce the bill even more. There is a point of diminishing returns with these things. But many companies will send you information related to winter utility billing systems, RUB systems. Not all RUB systems are created equal. Some of them do have some significant merit, but you really have to read the contracts carefully, and I would recommend having your attorney do the same because there's just no continuity with respect to RUB systems just yet. You'll also have cable companies approaching you for exclusives. Some of these deals can be very lucrative, but the same applies as what I said about RUB systems with respect to exclusivity of cable access. It may seem like it's a lucrative deal until the fine print states that it's a one-time payment for 20-year access, not an annual payment, as an example. So these are very serious contracts. Those that provide you with the contract in a check do anticipate that you will adhere to it. So you cannot take these in a cavalier fashion. You really do need to have counsel at your side when you're considering these. But it's not uncommon for, as an example, a 200-unit property to obtain a $50,000 one-time payment for exclusive access to their asset for cable company ABC. So it's a big number. It's hard to ignore, but just recognize that there's ramifications with future use, which can be not only extensive, but extended. So with respect to controlling expenses, you may not necessarily be able to control the water and sewer bill, but you can bring in other income that will reduce your overall utility expense. But just put it on a timeline so that you can see where it falls to make sure that it's something that is not only has short-term value for you in the property, but also long-term value. And there are so many expenses that utility expenses that you cannot control, water and sewer being one of them as an example. So if you have an older property in an older neighborhood and the sewer system is being replaced, if the public utility goes through the right channels and processes and does get granted the opportunity to replace the sewer, you already know that there's going to be an assessment for each and every property that's being affected, benefiting from that new sewer line, right? So it may be that 1 month your water and sewer bill is $1,000 a month, and the next month it's $1,500 a month, and there's really no direct way to pass on those costs to our residents. And that's where there really is not a connect between rent growth and utility expense. Just because you're in a market that is not experiencing growth doesn't necessarily mean that you'll have an opportunity to raise rents just because of utility expense increases. And the same is true, of course, for those neighborhoods that do have rent growth. They're not correlated to whatever that utility expense might be. But recognize that controlling utility expenditures needs to be a mainstay. It's a constant part of the business. The same as property presentation, the same as the level of complexity in property management. Controlling utility expenditures is something that needs your attention because it is in a constant state of change. And with that, if you're not watching it, it will become a larger percent of your variable expenses, which does what? Decrease net operating income. So anything you can do to solidify and increase NOI is a positive for the value of your assets, right? So a big part of that is controlling utility expenses. So when you look at your profit and loss statement, when you're trending that, when you look back over the last few quarters, can you see a trend with respect to utility expenses? Are they increasing? And if they are, why? If they're increasing because of increased occupancy, that's a positive, right? You have increased occupancy, therefore people are using more water, therefore people are using more electric, perhaps if your property pays for some portion of electric. So it's not always a bad thing when utility expenses increase. We want to know why they are increasing. That way, it's not a surprise. If they've increased significantly, then we should be ahead of the curve and know as opposed to being surprised by the event that, hey, this is expense has increased 15% over the last 90 days. Why is that? And if you've been tracking it all along, you'll already know the answer. Or if you've been tracking it all along, there is the potential that you can decrease it. So the other simple example, of course, which is used all the time, is toilets that are leaking, right? I mean, there's thousands of gallons, yes, even in Southern California, that are going into groundwater just because of stoppers in toilets that are old, that haven't been treated, that haven't been replaced in years and years. So it's a very small item, but you may want to look at toilet stoppers at the same time that your staff replaces filters in HVAC units. It's kind of a natural time to look at those because you already have a maintenance staff person in the unit, and it doesn't cost anything, much. They're $1 or $2 each to have them on, to have the stoppers as part of your routine maintenance. But at the end of the day, it can save you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars just by doing that 2-minute check when you're already in the unit anyway.
We're going to look at some of the questions that came in. And the first question we have is, what is a RUB system?
RUBS is R-U-B-S, B as in boy, all caps. If you put that into your search engine, you'll come up with a lot of different options on what that's meant. Sometimes it's referred to as a renter utility billing system. It also has other acronyms, but a RUB system is basically one that defers or redirects a part of the utility expenses for the property as a whole on a unit-by-unit basis. So let's say that your property has a $2,000 water bill, and then at the turnover, or at some point in time, then going forward, those utilities are divided on a per square foot basis to each unit, and the bill is sent to each unit for their percentage of the water usage, as an example. Yes, they're in effect. Yes, they can be effective. They're also controversial, kind of like stoplight, cameras. Nobody likes them, but somebody's making money from it. I think the jury is still out. I know they're being implemented more and more. But if you have the capacity to increase rents, I think you probably do just as well to increase rents to defray or defer increased expenses and utilities given the option, because it's still a single point of pay for your client, the resident, as compared to creating additional relationships and additional points of pay for them to stay in place. Now, one of the best things you can do as a property manager or an owner is extend the term of existing clients, right? Renewals, extending the term of existing residents so that you have less turnover. Well, there is a diminishing point there, whereas if rents are not pacing with market, then those extending the term are not necessarily a positive. But if you can retain the client and capture the rent growth specific to your market, then that's a win-win for the property, because there's lower turnover cost, or in some cases none, right, because they're not moving, and you're also pacing with market rents. So I think RUBS can get in the way of that. So I'm not convinced yet that it's I'm not convinced that it's going to take over the industry, whereas every owner will be looking to defer the cost of every utility to the resident over time.
At this moment, so I wanted to take a moment to go over a little bit more about what the Energy Network has to offer. So the Energy Network has a multifamily program which offers incentives for energy and water upgrades, and there is $1,200 per unit in rebate money that's available. Some of the measures that are eligible for the program are windows, lighting, HVAC units, appliances, water fixtures, and more. And the benefits would be lowering your operating costs, increasing the property value, and improving tenant retention. So this is a great opportunity that we encourage you to take advantage of. And if you want to learn more about how to participate in this program, or you want to find out about specifics about the program, you can contact the Energy Network at theenergynetwork.com, or you can call our hotline at 949-264-2062. And as I mentioned at the beginning, this was part one of a three-part series, and we hope that you enjoyed this webinar, and we would encourage you to come back to hear part 2 and 3. So our next part comes up May 28th, and we'll leave this slide up just for a little bit so that you can write down the link to register. It will be May 28th, and I believe it's going to be at 1 p.m., but we'll be sending out a follow-up email with the details as well so that you can register. And then part 3 is going to take place on June 18th. So those are both the registration links. We'll also be following up with you so that you can participate in those, but we just wanted you to have that so you can mark your calendars. And You can also check out our website, buildagreen.org. We have a ton of other webinars that are available in addition to this 3-part series, and we hope that you find these useful. We have a survey at the end of it so that we can improve our webinar offerings. We'd love for you to take that and help us make our offerings better. And just to follow up, so as I mentioned at the beginning, John Wilhoit does have a blog, Multifamily Insight, and if you wanted to check out some of his blog posts or more information about property management, you can visit his website, multifamilyinsight.net, and the company that he is the owner of, Wilhoit Investment Network. If you're interested, you can reach them at www.win-rei.com. Again, we would like to thank our presenter, John Wilhoit, and he did a fantastic job on his presentation. I wanted to provide his contact information in case you had any other questions or you wanted to reach him for whatever reason. So we'll leave this slide up for a few seconds so you can jot down his information. He's been fantastic to work with, and we're really excited that he's going to take part in our 3-part series, so we're really excited about that. And again, we'd like to thank you, John, for your time.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And about the Energy Network program, if you had any other specific questions in addition to the hotline that we mentioned before, I wanted to give you the program manager's contact information. David Myers down in Southern California, he is the regional director of the Energy Network Multifamily Program, and Jonathan Austin, he does our sales and outreach for this program, so he's working directly with property managers. So you can reach either both of them by email or phone, and they'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. Again, thank you for attending our webinar, and we hope to see you in Part 2 and Part 3. Have a great day.